All right, I think we might as well begin now. Thanks everyone for joining. This is a Zcash town hall, and the topic today is the Coinholder directed retroactive grants program. And so this is a new program which was recently ratified by Zcash coin holders themselves. And today we're going to learn a bit more about it. There's plenty of information on the forum, but it's always nice to have a call and have the community listening to some of the most knowledgeable people um, in the ecosystem. So joining us, we have Alex from Zcash Foundation and FPF. We have Josh Swihart of the Electric Coin Company, and we have Jason McGee from Shielded Labs. Welcome.
Hello. And thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, yeah, I guess we could begin with a bit of an introduction to Zcash grants and what they are, how they're funded. For people that don't know, there are currently different ways that you can acquire a development grant. So, to work on the Zcash protocol or as a part of the ecosystem, you can acquire a grant through ZCG. So, this is Zcash Community Grants. And in coordination with FPF, you can acquire a grant that way. So you make a proposal, and there's a committee of 5 people that will review and either approve or reject your proposal. There's also ZecHub. So we are really a smaller organization, and we invite potential global ambassadors or Zcash contributors um, to create artwork or documentation or do web development work in the form of bounties. And so, yeah, this introduces a new way to acquire a grant to work on Zcash. Um, I'm going to start with a bit of a curveball question. Uh, so, Zcash grants um, at the moment are funded by the protocol. So, a percentage of block rewards is devoted to funding these programs. Um, I'm going to put it to each of you who have joined the panel. Why is Zcash funded through protocol?
So some of it is anchored in history, but there's good reason. So, as a public good, y- we have this challenge, right, um, of getting funding, potentially from different sources. Like, where's the money going to come from? Is it going to come from donations? Traditionally, public goods funding through donations are, typically well underfunded. Um, The ECC has in the past had a significant amount of dialogue internally about, different funding sources for our work. There was some interest at various points in, when we started, we were seed funded by outside parties, and then there was some conversation as to whether or not we wanted to continue um, to try to get money from outside parties. The challenge with that alone is alignment problems. So the reason that we chose at the time, like, not to do that was, VCs or traditional investors will have certain outcomes that they want to get to in order to recoup their costs within a certain amount of time frame, and it may not be in line with the best interests of the broader community. And so the thought was that we could, like, if we were able to engage with the community, um, could deliver on behalf of the community without some kind of outside pressure to deliver outcomes from those, venture capitalists. There's different, philosophies on that, but that's where a lot of that started, and then it started with this kind of 20% anchoring. So, where it had been 20% of the block rewards have been used for funding ongoing development. There's now other models, and it's a mix of things in terms of grants that come from emissions and outside sources. One of the things that we wanted to do, which got us to here today, is to kind of start this process of moving away from guaranteed money. So for the longest time, ZF and ECC had been guaranteed money, which also creates sort of some perverse incentives, in my opinion, which is why ECC stepped away from accepting direct funding from the chain and pushed for a new grants-based model where, again, there would be funding of grants that is aligned with the community interests rather than outside parties. And um, but nobody would be guaranteed that. I mean, everybody has to kind of apply and it's on equal footing in terms of applying for funding the work.
Thanks. Great answer there. And so this is through when you say um, it's not guaranteed and it's decided by the community. This is done through something called the lockbox. And so this is in protocol. There's a percentage of the block reward which is almost reserved within the protocol. And so perhaps, Jason, could you explain exactly what the Coinholder directed retroactive grants program is and
Sure.
what it has to do with the lockbox?
Yeah. So I wanted to chime in on the last question that you had too. And I think if I had to give like the short answer of why block rewards funds development, I'd say two things. One, because you need to bootstrap the technology. And two, because the community overwhelmingly has supported it in various forms over the years. We've asked a number of questions via polls, both to coin holders, to ZCAP, ZAC, about the um, percentage of block rewards that should go towards development funding, whether it should be 20, less, more, if we wanted to continue it. And the response has been an overwhelming support to continue it as 20% of block rewards. So I guess to answer your second question now, I'll start off with a little bit of background. So last year, the community made the decision to stop funding organizations directly, like Josh said, and adopted ZIP 1015 as this temporary 1 year funding model. It allocated 8% to ZCG and 12% to this protocol lockbox, all under the assumption that the community would work towards a longer term solution. And then some of the rationale behind that, like Josh said, was to sort of end direct funding to specific organizations, move towards this grants based model, but it also looked to sort of further decentralize governance. The year it went by like super quick, and then there was this other call for proposals to introduce a new funding mechanism that would be seeded by the lockbox. People forward a number of different proposals. I think there were 7 in total. Some gave discretion to ZCG and ZCAP. Others sought to create like a DAO-like funding mechanism made up of different ecosystem stakeholders. One suggested to allocate 20% of block rewards to coin holders, but the one that ended up prevailing was this community and coin holder CNC funding model, which establishes that from November 2025, I'm sorry, November 2025 to the third halving in 2028, 12% of the block rewards will go to this coin holder grants program, while 8% goes to ZCG. So the coin holder grants program, it's going to be seeded with approximately 70,000 ZEC from a lockbox. Per the ZIP 1016 or the CNC model, there are key holder organizations, which include the three of us, Shielded Labs, ECC, and the Zcash Foundation, who manage these funds via a multi-sig wallet. And we're obligated to sort of execute on coin holder approved decisions, but we have a veto authority for like legal, regulatory, community harm concerns. And then, yeah, so we knew that the coin holders were going to direct grants, but we didn't have a process in place for how the program would work. A couple months ago, I proposed, actually at the ZEC Summit in Prague, that the program be structured as a retroactive grants program, and essentially just award funds for work that has already been completed. So if you compare it to ZCG, they have a milestone-based approach. This sort of like looks to limit administrative overhead, reduce complexity, and just make sure that it sort of aligns well with the structure of how coin holders vote. Um, yeah, I think late last month we had a coin holder vote, like you said. To They were asked to confirm that they wanted the grants program to be limited to retroactive funding, and it passed by an overwhelming majority. So now there's a open call for proposals with a deadline of October 12th, and so far we've only received one proposal.
Yeah, it'd be really good to see um more proposals coming in. Um, so having a retroactive grants program does introduce um I don't know, some differences to how grants have operated in the past with Zcash. And so yeah, what are some of the like challenges, I suppose, of switching or adding this new program? Like the work has to be completed, of course, and for like larger projects, there's I guess some initial investment required by the team themselves who are building, and this may not be suitable for like all the teams that may be interested in building on Zcash. Um, and so how would you see this being addressed, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think this provides some really interesting opportunities for proven teams to come in, either with, a fully baked idea that they deliver on completely, or maybe a complete idea that they deliver on in, um, chunks where they're able to get that retroactive funding for the pieces that are delivered on. So I think, there's still the opportunity for folks to go to ZCG, to Zec Hub. So I don't think it limits the like new entrants into the Zcash ecosystem, and new entrants to funding in the Zcash ecosystem. But I think what it does is really kind of provide this elevated platform for teams that really are able to kind of bootstrap those costs, which can be significant, um, but bring a different uh, approach, or a more fully realized idea to coin holders. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see who this attracts, and if we see orgs or companies come in that we're surprised to see, like that they're attracted to this, and see it as like a unique opportunity to contribute. But I don't think it's limiting in the sense that, yes, retroactive. Yes, there are only certain types of requests that can go to coin holders, but I'm really, honestly proud of the way the whole Zcash community has come together, and created a full ecosystem wide ability for groups, individuals of all sizes. If you come with a good idea, you come with support, you come with references for what you've completed before, you have a real awesome shot at getting funding from the community. And that's not always the case with grant programs in the crypto space. So in reality, I think it's very inclusive, and it really does reflect how this community, generally operates.
I just want to add one thing to that. Great points by Alex. Um, like speaking as a ZCG member, one issue that we constantly run into is that we approve a project that we're excited about, but when it's delivered or when it's completed, it's not used, or the product is not up to what our expectations were when we originally approved it. So with coin holder grants, with retroactive grants, you have the ability to assess the end product and whether or not it's used, see the value add, and then make the decision. And I think that's really one of the biggest sort of differences between the current ZCG model and a advantage for how funding gets allocated, because you can sort of make wiser decisions retroactively.
Yeah, if also I could add to that, with ZCG, you have the ability to reach out to 5 humans and have a conversation with them and, feel out what could work, what might not work, how you could modify a grant or an idea to potentially get funding. You need to come to the to coin holders with, a fully baked idea. You post publicly, of course you're gonna get public feedback, but as far as like fine tuning that grant, like it's not going to happen like it does with ZCG. So the strategies that will be employed by people seeking funding from the coin holders are going to be really interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see how people break down what, their requests and how they go about, setting themselves up for success. And so I'm fascinated to kind of see how the first couple quarterly votes go and what submissions are provided, because it's going to be different, and I think we might see some surprises that are super interesting and beneficial for the Zcash community.
Interesting. I noticed you said quarterly. And so are we expecting, or should we expect, for this grant application process to be repeated 4 times in a year?
Yeah, that's in the zip that it's set up that way. Um, so as proposed, pulling coin holders and going through that process, and a lot of coin holders like they don't have the time to follow everything and on like a day-to-day basis necessarily. Um, Especially some of the larger allocators or holders. And so it gives them time, um, like a regular set time where they can plan around reviewing proposals and voting. And it's able to allow then a comparison. So if there's multiple proposals that come in, they can choose what they think was effective, or not effective, or kind of compare these outcomes to determine how they want to vote. I will say too, like before the Jason's proposal, ECC is applying it, so we will submit an application here before not too long, for a retroactive grant for a period stemming November of last year when we stopped receiving funding. So we've been working without funding for a little over 7, well, now longer, but our grant application will run through the first half of this last year. So it will be interesting to see if the coin holders will support it. But before Jason's proposal, ECC had always planned on doing a retroactive grant, and there's a few reasons why, and so maybe this will be helpful. One is that if you're doing the kind of work that we do on the protocol itself, and what we try to do with Zashi is somewhat reactive to the market and what we see. So when you're planning out a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever, and you apply for a grant, then you're on the hook to deliver that exactly to what you have requested in the grant. And if something changes, say there's a regulatory change or something changes in the market, it restricts your ability to be opportunistic and to say, okay, we think this is better for the Zcash community to prioritize this way. Or in some cases, there's dependencies on other things. Like we've had a dependency on near, for example, when we're going to do cross chain payments. Um, so I took that. I said, well, for ECC, like it would make sense to apply for a retroactive grant rather than forward looking grant. But as people that are capital allocators or people that have a significant amount of holdings of the coin holders, would they be in support of something like that? So I did a little road trip and met with some and laid out what we were planning to do with the retroactive grant. And overwhelmingly, um, those holders were in support of a retroactive grant. One told me that like it's a capital allocator's dream, right? Because most of the time, um, this person's an investor and Like most of the time when they make an investment, it's speculative and they're hoping it is going to pay off. And in this case, the team has already proven that they've delivered and they've delivered value, and I'm not going to pay them until they show that they've delivered value. And so there's kind of a lot of interest in that kind of model. But again, as highlighted by Alex and Jason, there's these different models. We have ZCG, which is structured differently than the retroactive grant model. So it is inclusive, and broadly open to to all kinds of projects and teams.
Yeah, we really have 3 grants programs. We have ZCG, which is the most flexible, that allows milestone-based grants where you can receive upfront or, milestone by milestone payments. We have the retroactive Coinholder grants program, and then ZecHub has the DAO and also their bounty program for different educational and community initiatives. Like, no matter what somebody's looking for, like, I feel like Zcash can sort of accommodate the structure that works best for them.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, definitely would agree. And when Josh mentioned overwhelming support from coin holders um, to ratify the retroactive grants program, on question one of the poll, 1.4, I think almost 1.5 million coins voted. Um, Almost half of the shielded Orchard Zec um, was in support of the retroactive grants program, which is pretty cool. That said, I should note, even for myself, I would consider myself like a super Zcasher. Um, the the entire like coin holder voting process itself seems, to me, somewhat of a challenge to get a full handle on. Um, and so, yeah, could we dive into a bit more about um, the way in which coin holders themselves will be able to vote on these grant applications? Um, so we've received one, I think Bitcoin VN, instant exchange, custodial exchange platform in Vietnam, has integrated shielded ZAC swaps. And so we have a timeline of this round, I suppose, in which the proposal submission deadline is October 12th. So projects that wish to receive a retroactive grant for their work have until October 12th to submit their proposal. Um, there's then a 30-day review period. Could we maybe understand what this review period is? Will holders be notified of um, proposals that come in, or is it like incumbent on them to stay up to date?
Yeah, so a couple things here. So the mandatory 30-day review period is part of ZIP 1016 to give coin holders enough time to review before making a decision. There will be communication that goes out that sort of gives an overview of what's available in the treasury, summarizes all the proposals, and then gives links to the proposal if they want to review the complete and total detail. Um, from there, there's a registration period that has to happen given this proof of balance protocol that community developer Han created. That lasts for 2 weeks. And during that period, you need to either move your coins into Orchard or you need to re register those notes by just sending like a quick transaction to yourself. There's a start block height and then an end block height where those notes need to be registered within that window. And then from there, we allow, I think, somewhere around 2 weeks for coin holders to cast their vote, somewhere between 10 days and 2 weeks. I'm not looking at the timeline right now. But I want to say that a couple things. One, it is amazing how the parabolic increase we've seen in the amount of coins being voted from poll to poll. This was originally introduced last year um, in Y Wallet by Han. And I think the first coin holder poll that we had only around somewhere between 200 to 300,000 coins voted. Then it went to 500,000 in the next one. A few months later, we had one that was a million. And now this one had 1.5 million. So more and more people are getting comfortable with this idea of moving funds into Orchard and using the protocol to um, to vote their coins. It's really finicky. You gotta move your coins into a wallet, and then for security reasons, move them out before you enter your seed phrase into the application to vote. It's not ideal. Hopefully, we have it in wallet in future versions. Um, but the other thing I wanted to say was um, the app itself is very buggy and it can take a lot of time to cast your vote and it can be very annoying. I ran into a few different issues, had to try multiple different computers because I kept airing out on my new MacBook Pro. But eventually, after a couple hours, I was able to cast my vote on all three questions. Definitely not ideal, a lot of friction, and I'm hoping that we can fix that in future versions. I've encouraged Han, for example, to apply for an ongoing support and maintenance grant to sort of help fix some of those bugs.
Awesome. And so, yeah, just to clarify for everyone, the Coinholder voting process itself is also decentralized to some extent. Anyone can run a voting authority, and it is possible to audit the Coinholder vote, the Coinholder poll once it's complete. And so, what would be really cool is to see community members themselves running these voting authorities and like further strengthening the security of this entire process. Um, yeah, I suppose we could now go over um, what to look forward to. So, yeah, I guess retroactive grants program itself is fairly straightforward. It's a new grants program for Zcash. It will be retroactive, and so projects that complete work can submit a proposal and apply for coin holders to approve their work. Um, oh, so actually, moving forward, this needs to be added to the protocol to allow um, funds to be distributed from the lockbox itself. And so this is called Network Upgrade 6.1 or NU 6.1. Um, the previous network upgrade added the lockbox, and since then, I'm seeing 63,288 ZEC in the lockbox. And so, yeah, could we talk about the network upgrade 6.1 and yeah, the process for having it go into testnet, the expected date in which it activates, and yeah, what this means for Zcash itself.
Yeah, we're working on it. Some others are like DF is as well, but um, yeah. So it was intended to be kind of an interim, so it's a one-time disbursement mechanism, so it's not a long-term solution. But it allows us to transfer the exec that's in the lockbox to other addresses using P2SH, so using a multi-sig between, again, Shielded Labs, BCC, and the Zcash Foundation. The key generation process hasn't happened yet. That will happen pretty soon. So we'll have that mechanism to be able to do it. Again, that's for a one-time disbursement. So the long-term solution um, is a little bit more complex, and so right now that is planned to be distributed in or to be implemented in U7, which at this point is like mid next year. So we're going to be in this interesting window as well, where um, we'll have this initial. If the coin holders vote to approve any of the grants, then there will be an initial distribution, which would happen, the end of November or beginning of December, and then we are in a kind of a waiting period until we have the long term solution, since this one can't be kind of reused. Um, so that's kind of the timetable, and it will have some interesting decisions to make as it relates to the timing of everything next year.
And so I assume this would require a new zip for the like long-term distribution
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
specification.
Mhm.
And so where
Yeah. You want to be
we
able
will
to
it
have
go? Sorry.
there's yeah, 'cause there's some things, for example, like key rotation, if we want to be able to add additional signers, there's flexibility that needs to be in the protocol. That they just won't be there for this first one for the sake of time. So we really wanted to focus on Zcash deprecation at ECC, and being able to get everybody on the foundation developed ZBRD nodes, and so it was a short term trade off, but long term it needs to be more robust.
Right. And so this actually brings up something that I've been very interested in, which is like the process for selecting candidates to include in network upgrades. Um, so we will have NEU 6.1 towards the end of this year. And then looking forward, there are like many things which could potentially be added into NEU 7. So are there any thoughts from any members of the panel on like the current process for selecting uh, features which could be included in future network upgrades?
I chime in again, but um, and the other, the foundation and Solar Labs, Jason and Alex may have different opinions or whatever. But yeah, this gets into like protocol governance, right? And um, unless there's like firm community support for changes to consensus, if we're talking specifically about network upgrades, um, then the result is stasis, right? Nothing gets implemented. Now, how we get there, like traditionally, we've done this kind of combination of polling of different community groups, and whether it's ZCAP or the ECC ZAC or other communities or coin holders in order to determine whether or not there's like broad community consensus for a given consensus change in the protocol. Anybody can submit a zip. The zip process is out there and well defined, and the zip reviewers will review it and provide feedback, not on the idea per se, but just on the semantics and making sure that it's implementable. There's some conversation about changing that process a little bit. Whether it's a governance zip that actually requires consensus changes or actual protocol changes. Um, but we have that basic zip process. It goes out to the community. Community can weigh in, and again, if there's clear community consensus for making a change, then it gets in there. Some of those things, there's some haggling, right? We've had some conversations in the past about different types of upgrades. So some upgrades are more complicated than others as it relates to the ecosystem today. Anything that requires a transaction format change, um, there's some conversation within the community on how to make that simpler, so that's not such a big deal. Um, and then basically, what ECC will do, like the foundation has, and there's been some controversy around this, or at least a way that I framed it in the forum, um, around GitHub repositories. So we're advocating that organizations kind of maintain their own kind of process and are able to kind of implement things within a repo that doesn't affect the others. Um, and then if they're able to get done and demonstrate that it works, that it's safe, that it's gone through audits and that kind of thing, to advocate for their changes being merged in, not to be able to run necessarily, not to try to create competitive consensus software, but to allow teams to work in parallel and much more quickly than we have in the past, so that there's no like a single choke point. Um, but that's kind of roughly how um, that works or will be working.
Yeah, one thing, like, to follow up to that, I mean, I think the ecosystem is progressing rapidly. We're getting things done. We're cooperatively, working together to deliver on things that, we've all been working on for quite some time. And I feel like we're seeing an evolution of the ecosystem. And I think we need to continue to see that evolution in the zip process, in the how we reach consensus. Like, these things should be discussed. We should be considering alternatives, and I think we should be sure that we're not leaving you know we're not leaving things for the future that we should be starting to discuss now and working towards. Which, like, okay, I'm being a little vague, but I think, like, overall we just there's some opportunities, I think, in the future for things to for certain processes and approaches to evolve. I think that's really the best way to put it. And yeah, I think the ecosystem itself is in a really healthy place. We're able to have we're able to disagree. We're able to have, debate, healthy debate, and, eventually able to reach consensus. And, I'd like to see that same, like, approach, that same environment used to, continue our evolution. Because it feels like, it to me, it still feels like we're at, like, the beginning. Like, it still feels like there's so much potential. We've got this huge runway in front of us that, it's, like, up to us to take advantage and realize the full potential of Zcash. And I think, we're on the way. And governance and the zip process and all those things are a part of that, and need to keep pace with the pace of change with the technology implementations and those things.
Definitely. Yes, 100%. Yeah, there has been a lot of change that I've seen even in the past year. And so, yeah, we've had Orchard come around, and we've had now the lockbox and a new grants program. And yeah, we're with this grants program allowing like new people from other communities to start contributing to Zcash. And soon we're going to have network sustainability mechanism, Zcash shielded assets, crosslink. And so, yeah, Zcash is very dynamic at the moment. And yeah, having a governance system that can keep up would be really cool. And so, yeah, I did post, if you have any questions, post them in the replies. We have a question from Dismad. How can the community stay engaged and get involved with Coinholder grant process?
I mean, I think there's plenty of ways to get engaged now. I mean, there's so many vibrant groups out there in the Discord R&D. If you're a developer, if you're a community member in the global Discord, there's a Telegram group, very vibrant group and growing, rapidly growing group on X or Twitter. And we have the Zcash community forum. There's a number of core community members that I think if somebody's interested in, they're easy to identify, you can reach out to, and they're a friendly group that could tell you how to get involved, depending on your interests. So the opportunity is there. There's a lot to do. There are a lot of places to help out. If you're specifically interested in the Coinholder grant program, like one thing that we need that Squirrel mentioned was more people running voting authorities. And we've been lucky enough to get the minimum 4 volunteers each vote. But it would be great to have more people engaged in that process and involved in that process, just so if there are quarters where people can't participate, we have other community members to fall back on.
Yeah. Also, just to add, each time we run these processes, it's going to be a learning experience. So, please provide feedback if you see an area where we could be more efficient, or something could be worded better, there's confusion, etc. Like, don't hesitate to reach out so we can implement. And, like, one that is another benefit to this quarterly approach is gives us some time to review, make sure the next time is better. It's iterating each time.
I want to say for the last vote that we just had last month, the voting authorities spent 10 hours trying to get their BFT nodes up and um, like synced. And I think one way to encourage more participation would be to provide funding or a bounty for that position. And I think that would also encourage more people to take part.
Very, very interesting. So at the moment, there is a bounty from Emersonian. This is the team that runs Zcash Light Wallet servers. And so they're inviting people to also run their own Light Wallet servers and receive ZEC in like as a reward for the uptime of their servers. And so having like rewards for people starting their own Light Wallet servers and having rewards for people getting involved in Coinholder voting as like a coordinating server, I think that would be pretty cool. Um, yeah, we should look into that.
Agreed.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess we covered all of the topics. If people want to learn more about Coinholder directed retroactive grants, they can go to the Zcash community forum. So that's forum.zcashcommunity.com. I think it was mentioned a couple of times. If people have comments on the current zip process, I think it's defined in zip 0. You can go to zips.z.cash and see the zip there, and if you've got any improvements that you can think of, mention it on the forum or write the zip itself. Great. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining.